My name's Eli Navarro, and I'm 31, though some days my back says 43 and my heart says permanently tired. On paper, I'm boring in all the acceptable ways. I rent a second-floor unit over a vape shop in East Dallas, drive a dented red Ford Ranger that wheezes in cold weather, and fix ACs for a living, which means I sweat through my shirt before 10 a.m., 6 months out of the year. But if you ever saw my sister Brielle walk into a room, you'd never guess she shared DNA with someone like me. She's 25 built, like she was plucked straight from a summer music festival, with hair the color of orange soda and a laugh that makes heads swivel. She's also allergic to consequences. If drama were a drug, she'd be chasing the high full time. When she was 16, she took Dad's Jeep joyriding, crashed it into a mailbox, and posted selfies from the scene. In college, she got banned from a credit union for trying to manifest a better overdraft limit. My parents, Linda and Ray, always called her free-spirited. Translation, Eli will clean it up. And for a while I did. I was still living at home, working weekends with my Uncle Dave in duct repair, and taking online classes at night. Every time she broke something, a heart, a curfew, a lease, I grabbed the broom and swept. I thought I was buying her time to grow up. Turns out, she was just buying more gas for the chaos machine. By the time I moved out, I was still bankrolling her life. She'd text me stuff like, $50, gas, love you or emergency textbook lol, usually followed by a picture of her at brunch. I never saw the textbooks, or the thanks. Then came Tasha, the first serious woman I dated in years. After month 3, she looked at me and said, "You don't have a girlfriend. You have a sister-shaped leash." That one stung. We broke up a few weeks later. Fast forward to this past spring. Texas was already melting sidewalks, and my AC truck was clinging to life. That Friday, I got a text from Brielle, "Need $500 for a booth at Club Verge tonight. Velvet ropes, rooftop view, VIP. Can you spot me?" I was 2 stories up on a mall rooftop, juggling condenser coils and swearing under my breath while sweat poured into my eyes. I stared at the message and typed, "Can't." Trying to save for a down payment. Bubble, pause, reappear. Ugh, you're such a buzzkill. Saturday morning, I made my coffee, locked up, and stepped outside. My parking space was empty. The kind of empty that makes your stomach go weightless. I checked the lot, walked it twice, called the apartment manager. No tow records. That's when my gut, trained after years of Brielle-related emergencies, lit up like a fire alarm. I unlocked my phone. 3:07 a.m. Message from Brielle. "Borrowed your truck for a spin. She drives like silk. Don't be mad, big bro attached." A photo of her in my driver's seat, lipstick on point, nails glittering like championship rings. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I called. "5th ring," she answered. "Eli," she screamed over EDM beats. "Relax. I'm bringing your little red tank back tomorrow. I just needed an entrance car. You stole my truck, Brielle. It's not stealing if we share DNA. Also, you weren't even using it. It's my name on the title. My loan." She laughed. "Semantics. Gotta go. They're playing my song." She hung up before I could scream. The rest of Saturday was a blur of anxiety, pacing, and worst-case scenarios. I imagined her getting pulled over, driving drunk, or slamming into something expensive. And in that premonition, it hit at 2:13 a.m. Her name lit up my screen. I picked up, heart racing. "Eli," she hiccuped, "don't freak out, I'm okay. But I might have sort of crashed the truck." "What?" "It's not as bad as it sounds. I mean, maybe a little. It was just a column outside Dos Gatos. Remember that cantina near Street Mary's? I saw Tyler, my ex. He was with some bleach blonde bimbo, and well, I kind of nudged the truck into a decorative pillar. You turned my truck into a weapon over your ex? Can we do this later? The cops are here. If you say you loaned me the truck, it's just property damage, no biggie." I didn't respond. "Eli?" she said. Silence. "Wow, you can be such a selfish dick sometimes." I ended the call. By dawn, I'd received 20 missed calls from my mom. My dad texted, "This is family. Handle it." Even my aunt chimed in, "We all make mistakes, sweetie. Be the bigger person." I muted the chat and went to work. At lunch, I got the final blow. Text from Dad coming by. "We're settling the repair bill." He showed up an hour later, mom in tow. red-eyed and wringing a casserole dish like it was a baby bird. Dad said nothing until I opened the door. "Get your shoes. You're paying Rachel's damage." "She stole and crashed my truck." Mom blinked. "She was hurting. You abandoned her. For a bottle service and clout?" That's when it happened. My dad slapped me. Open palm. Fast. Sharp. My ears rang. I tasted blood. "You're no longer our son," he spat. Behind him, my mom gasped, "but never reached for me. You're cut off. From the will. From the family chat. Fix this, or stay erased." I shut the door on them. Hands shaking. Cheek burning. It should have broken me. But weirdly, it didn't. It unlocked me. That was the day I stopped being the family's insurance policy. That was the day I chose myself. I didn't sleep that night. My cheek was still warm from the slap, but the part that stung more was how quickly they all lined up against me, like I was the villain for finally drawing a line. I kept replaying it, my dad's voice cracking with rage, my mom holding a dish like it was going to fix things, and me just standing there like a punching bag that finally decided to move. I called in sick the next morning, not because I was sick, but because I didn't trust myself to climb a ladder with shaking hands and a head full of adrenaline. I made coffee I didn't drink and stared at the empty space where my truck should have been. Then came the knock. Firm, rhythmic, official. I opened the door to a man in uniform flanked by another in plain clothes. The one in the polo flashed a badge, not dramatically, just enough. "Eli Navarro?" I nodded. "Detective Rivas, SAPD. We need a statement. There's been a stolen vehicle report filed against you." I laughed, short and humorless. "You mean the truck my sister took and wrecked?" He stepped inside when I moved aside. Not aggressive, but very much in control. "She says you loaned it to her, then threatened to extort her afterward. Said you demanded $5,000 to make it go away." I didn't shout, didn't even raise my eyebrows. I just handed him my phone and opened the message thread. Her 3:00 a.m. Selfie in my truck, the lipstick, the caption. His partner leaned in. That's what we call self-incrimination. Rivas nodded. "Do you want to press charges?" It wasn't a quick decision. I didn't jump to yes out of anger. I let the question sit there like fog before a long drive. Then I said, yes. Grand theft auto. Filing a false report. He wrote it down like it was just another form in a stack. Maybe it was. That night, the phone started again. My mom sobbing about forgiveness. My dad's voice low and threatening like a coiled hose that might snap. Rachel left a string of voicemails that swung from furious to pathetic in less than 2 minutes. I didn't listen past the first few seconds of each. I didn't need to. They were always the same flavor: deflect, blame, beg. News of the charges hit her world like a grenade. Her job put her on unpaid leave before the ink dried. By the time her mugshot circulated, they cut her loose entirely. Her party crew vanished faster than a bar tab on payday. Her landlord changed the locks within days. I didn't gloat. I didn't post screenshots or vent online. I just made dinner, watched something mindless, and fell asleep with the kind of quiet only found after a storm. A week later, they showed up again. My parents, standing at my door like missionaries who'd lost their pamphlets. Mom held another casserole, this one still warm. "Just let her stay until she gets back on her feet," she said, like we were talking about a sprained ankle, not felony theft. "There's a shelter on 5th Street, I said gently. Dad's face cracked just for a second. "You used to be kind," he muttered. "You used to be my dad," I replied. I shut the door softer this time. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. When the arraignment date came, I wore a clean shirt and sat in the second row beside my lawyer, a calm woman named Miss Tran, who had a voice like folded linen. Rachel walked in wearing jail orange like it was a costume she'd accidentally picked up. Her eyes scanned the courtroom like she couldn't quite believe this was real. Her lawyer tried to spin the charges as a family misunderstanding, but Tran handed over the texts, the photo, the call logs, and the repair estimates like receipts at a checkout line. The judge didn't look moved. He read out the charges, set bail high, and didn't bother pretending sympathy. When the gavel fell, it felt like an earthquake for everyone else. For me, it felt like gravity returning. Outside the courthouse, Tran warned me, this won't be over. Families retaliate in all kinds of creative ways. She was right. The next morning, my bank sent me a fraud alert. Someone had tried to change my payroll deposit info. The IP address traced back to my mom's old laptop. She must have remembered my security answers from when I was in high school. I changed every password I had, added two-factor, and called HR to reroute manually. Another brick in the wall. I went to work, but I moved like someone walking with weights in their boots. My foreman, Camilo, noticed. "Rough week?" he asked, nodding at the faded bruise on my jaw. "Family stuff," I said. "Man," he whistled. "Worst battlefield there is." During lunch, he told me about his cousin who totaled his car during a drunk joyride. Camilo pressed charges. His cousin spent weekends in jail, but now they grill carne asada every 4th of July. "Sometimes you gotta force the growth," he said, tapping his thermos like a preacher. At night, I tried to sleep, but guilt would creep in like a draft under a locked door. I'd stare at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen, tempted to drop the complaint. Then I'd remember the slap, the lie. The $500 bottle service asked like it was a birthday gift she forgot I didn't want. I'd flip the phone face down like a loaded weapon. I started seeing a therapist through my job's assistance program. Dr. Morales wore socks with constellations on them and smiled like she'd already seen the ending of your story but wasn't going to spoil it. She said guilt was a twisted kind of loyalty, the kind we inherit, not earn. She taught me breathing techniques and helped me understand the difference between boundaries and walls. I told her about the messages from my mom, the silence from my dad, the voicemail from Rachel where she sang her apology to the tune of some old pop song, voice cracking halfway through. "Forgiveness," Dr. Morales said, "isn't a phone call. It's a muscle. You can stretch it without using it." I liked that. It made space for delay. Around that time, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. Said he heard what happened. Said my dad called me lost to bitterness. Then added, "For what it's worth, I think you finally stood up." I thanked him. Told him if he ever visited Dallas, I'd buy the first round. He responded with a thumbs up and a screenshot of a flight search. That night, I sat on my balcony with a beer and no phone in reach. Just the low hum of cars and the distant echo of someone else's party. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't scare me. It felt earned, not empty. And that made all the difference. The weeks after, the arraignment moved like molasses. Everything around me looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I still climbed the same aluminum ladders, still hauled coils and rewired thermostats, but something had changed in how I moved through the world. Lighter, maybe. Not because the weight was gone, just because I had finally stopped carrying someone else's. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for a new mess. A voicemail laced with guilt. A call dripping with fake concern. I listened to none of them. I let the digital noise pile up like snow on an empty doorstep. The system would deal with Rachel now. I had no more favors to give. Court updates came in thick envelopes and thin emails, each stamped with legalese and dates I scribbled into a calendar I never used before. Her lawyer tried everything. Plea deal offers that danced between absurd and desperate. One suggested dropping the felony if I agreed to counseling with Rachel, like the issue was miscommunication and not criminal theft. My attorney, Tran, didn't even blink. "They're grasping," she said flatly. "They know you have evidence, and they're hoping guilt will do what logic won't." The moment I realized guilt wasn't a leash anymore, I felt taller. Not happier, just aligned. Like my spine remembered its job. When I wasn't working, I read. Nothing deep, just pulpy novels about other people's chaos. Fictional chaos was manageable. You could close the book whenever you wanted. I cleaned my apartment with weird satisfaction, reorganized drawers like I was making space for a new self. Camilo joked that I was nesting. "You pregnant with inner peace or something?" I shrugged and handed him a wrench. More like peace and no dependence. We both laughed, and it felt like the first laugh in months that didn't come with an asterisk. On a Tuesday morning thick with humidity, I got a letter, certified mail, fancy envelope, law firm out of San Antonio. I peeled it open with a screwdriver because I was already in the middle of fixing a unit and figured it was all paperwork anyway. Inside was a notice from my parents' attorney, the Miller Family Trust, the same one my dad bragged about building back when he wore golf shirts and gave financial advice at barbecues, was being dissolved and restructured. Under the new terms, all assets would pass solely to members of the family deemed supportive. I read the sentence twice, then again. There was a sticky note attached in my mother's handwriting. "We're praying you come to your senses. Love, Mom." The envelope weighed less than a feather. The disappointment, even less. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked to the kitchen, lit a match, and let the paper curl into ash in the sink. I didn't even need water to put it out. That same weekend, I signed up for a volunteer slot with Habitat for Humanity. Tran had suggested it in passing during a court prep meeting. "Sometimes you just need to build something that stays standing," she'd said, so I did. I showed up with gloves and no expectations, and found myself hammering nails next to people who had no clue about my past and didn't care. There's something healing about shared silence, the kind where you're not being watched, judged, or pulled into old roles. Just labor and sun and the smell of fresh wood. That's where I met her, Mara. She wore paint-splattered jeans and worked a drill like it owed her money. We didn't talk much that first day, just eye contact and a few smiles over bent nails. But when she offered me half her sandwich without asking if I was hungry, I felt something shift. We went for coffee a few days later, then sushi. Then a secondhand bookstore where we got lost in different aisles but walked out with matching bookmarks. I told her the short version: family mess, legal fallout. She didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "Healthy boundaries are sexy." I laughed harder than I meant to. For the first time in years, someone saw my lines and didn't try to step over them. Meanwhile, Rachel's case dragged on. The court kept rescheduling. Paperwork moved at the pace of cold syrup. Eventually, she accepted a plea, probation, mandatory counseling, and a restitution plan that would take her 15 years to repay if she worked minimum wage and never missed a payment. When Tran sent me the final court summary, I didn't feel triumph, just finality. Like the credits had rolled and I could leave the theater. That same day, I got one last message from my mom. It was short. "If you insist on this hard heart, you should at least know your sister tried to kill herself." There were no hospital records, no follow-up, just a weaponized statement with no return address. I showed it to Dr. Morales. She read it, nodded, and said, "Sometimes people cry wolf to reset the power dynamic. You don't have to play along." I didn't reply. If Rachel was truly in crisis, they'd send an attending physician's name. They never did. 4th of July came. I spent it on Mara's porch. She grilled vegetables while I tossed a tennis ball for Radar, a scruffy shelter dog I'd adopted 2 weeks earlier. He'd been left behind by a family who moved states and didn't take him. The shelter volunteer said he chewed up a couch. I said, "So do I sometimes." We made a good pair. I watched fireworks light up the sky and didn't flinch. For once, explosions didn't mean danger, just spectacle. Mara sat beside me, barefoot, humming something I didn't recognize. "You miss Texas?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly the food, not the trauma." She grinned. "Fair." I looked at her, at Radar, at the faint skyline beyond the trees. I realized then that I hadn't lost a family. I'd just stopped bleeding for one that mistook my silence for consent. And now I was free to build one of my own, not inherited, chosen. The next morning, I framed the title to my truck, the one Rachel had totaled, and I'd rebuilt piece by piece and hung it above the door, right where the family chat used to ping with endless requests. That paper meant something. Not just ownership, but reclamation. My name, my effort, my life, untangled at last. And that, more than any legal win, was the victory I never thought I'd taste. Summer melted into early fall, and for the first time in a long time, the change in seasons didn't feel like a deadline. There were no looming family dinners, no guilt-tripped birthdays, no passive-aggressive countdowns to show up and smile. Just cooler air, longer shadows, and a rhythm that finally felt like mine. Radar and I developed routines. Morning walks before the sun got aggressive. Coffee on the fire escape with the newspaper open but unread. I'd flip the pages, let my eyes skim headlines, and mostly just watch the street below. Mara started sleeping over more often. Not all the time. Not in a way that felt like we were sprinting. It was slow, intentional, quiet, in the best ways. She left her favorite mug in my cabinet without ceremony. I started making room in the closet without needing to say it out loud. We didn't label it. We just lived it. I hadn't thought about Rachel in weeks, maybe even a month. Not because I didn't care, I just didn't owe her my bandwidth anymore. Then, on a cold Monday in late September, I got a text from my cousin Mateo, short and blunt. Uncle Ray had a minor stroke. In the hospital. Thought you should know. I read it 3 times, waiting for something to stir. Maybe panic. Maybe urgency. But what arrived instead was a quiet question: what do I do with this information? I texted Mateo back. Thanks. Tell him I hope he recovers. That was it. No airport search. No suitcase half-packed in guilt. Just a wish for his health, followed by the rest of my day continuing as scheduled. When I told Dr. Morales later that week, she nodded like she'd been expecting it. That's what boundaries look like, she said. You acknowledged. You didn't absorb. That's progress. It didn't feel cold. It felt clean. I didn't even know which hospital he was in until Mateo followed up with a photo of the whiteboard in the ICU room. My dad's name, patient ID, and a smiley face drawn in a nurse's marker. I stared at it for a few seconds, felt the old pull of the son they'd raised obedient, guilt-ridden, ready to fix. But that version of me had been laid to rest the day my dad's hand left a mark across my cheek and his words cut deeper than the slap. He hadn't called, hadn't written. His silence was deliberate. So it was mine. I closed the message without responding. Around that time, Mara and I adopted a second dog, a 3-legged terrier mix named Comet. The shelter said he'd been hit by a car and left in a ditch. Nobody claimed him, but he still wagged like life had given him a trophy. Watching Comet sprint across the dog park was a daily sermon in resilience. No pity, just movement. That little guy kept up with radar like he had a point to prove. And maybe he did. Maybe we all did. In our own way. Mara loved him instantly. I think part of her related. She'd told me once, quietly, that her family stopped talking to her after she came out. They weren't cruel, just indifferent. Sometimes that's worse. Silence with a smile, absence dressed as peace. We talked about family a lot, not in bitter tones, but like archaeologists sifting through ruins, curious, detached, reverent toward what might have been. One night over wine, she asked if I ever thought about reaching out to Rachel. I let the question sit before answering. Sometimes, I admitted, but mostly in the way you think about an old injury. You remember how it happened, and you're glad it's not hurting anymore. She nodded, didn't push, just sipped her wine and tucked her foot under mine on the couch. That's how she loved without intrusion, with presence, not pressure. A few days later, I got another message, this time from an unknown number. Just 3 lines. This is Rachel. I completed 90 days sober. My counselor says I should make amends. I understand if you block me. Just wanted to say I'm sorry. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. No demands, no guilt trip, just words. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I saved the number. Not because I was ready to talk, but because it felt different. Not performative, not weaponized. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe not. But for once, I didn't feel compelled to find out right away. Dr. Morales once told me that forgiveness is a gift you wrap for yourself, not something you deliver until you're ready. I wasn't unwrapping anything just yet, but I left it on the shelf, within reach. Fall rolled in like a soft reset. The trees around our block started turning rust and gold. The hardware store hung fake cobwebs and battery-powered ghosts in the window. I bought a little pumpkin for the kitchen, mostly because Mara pointed to it and smiled. Domesticity snuck up on me. In the quiet, I noticed how much space I used to give away, how much time I spent trying to be seen by people committed to overlooking me. I hadn't realized how loud that silence had been until it was replaced by laughter over burned pancakes and spontaneous weekend hikes. I started measuring peace in smaller increments. Nights I didn't think about what-ifs. Mornings that began without dread. Bank accounts that stayed untouched by family emergencies. The absence of crisis became its own kind of luxury. On Thanksgiving, the first made dinner for the first time without Googling a recipe or calling my mom. It wasn't fancy. Chicken instead of turkey. Stuffing from a box. But the table was mine. Radar curled under my feet. Comet begged shamelessly for scraps. Mara lit a candle that smelled like cinnamon and pine. We ate and talked and laughed. No tension. No old wounds lurking between spoonfuls. Just 3 lives intersecting, sharing the same moment in full. I caught myself smiling halfway through the meal, not because anything extraordinary was happening, but because for once, nothing was falling apart, and that felt extraordinary. At the end of the night, I opened the door to let the dogs out one last time. Cold air spilled in. I stepped outside with them, watched their breath fog in the moonlight. The stars were out, sharp and clean against the dark. I whispered a small thank you to whoever was listening, not for what I had, but for what I had let go of, and what I'd learned to protect: myself, my space, my peace. The first snow came earlier than expected, soft and silent, frosting the city like someone whispered peace into the air. I watched it fall from the living room window, a mug of chamomile tea warming my palms, while Radar snored gently at my feet and Comet chewed the ear off another toy like it had insulted his ancestors. Mara was still asleep, curled on the couch with one arm draped over her eyes, like the light dared to challenge her weekend rest. These were the kinds of mornings I used to imagine, but never believed I'd have. Not because they were flashy, but because they were calm. And calm had always been a luxury I paid for in apologies. Until now. A week into December, I received another letter. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. Looping, elegant, still clinging to some idea of control that bled through even her pen strokes. I considered tossing it, letting it rot unopened with the others. But curiosity is a quiet hook. I slid it open with the back of a butter knife. Inside was a printed notice from the Miller family's new attorney. The trust, what remained of it, was officially being divided. Revised terms excluded me entirely. Assets, properties, residuals, all reallocated between my parents and supportive heirs. Attached to the legal paperwork was a sticky note, barely stuck to the margin, with 4 words written in my mother's handwriting. "We're still praying, Eli." I didn't feel rage or heartbreak, just a detached clarity, like reading a plot twist in a story I'd already solved. I folded the letter, dropped it in the sink, and struck a match. The flame curled the paper into memory. Radar wandered over, sniffed the ash, then looked up like he was asking if it was finally over. "Yeah, buddy," I said, "it is." Later that afternoon, I told Mara about the letter while we made chili and argued over how much spice counted as too much. She didn't offer advice, just listened, stirred the pot with one hand, rested the other on the small of my back. That was her way. Steady presence. No noise. I told her I wasn't sad about the money. I'd stopped counting on that inheritance. The same day I stopped counting on apologies. What lingered was the pettiness, the quiet, calculated cut. But even that was losing its sting. After dinner, I went into the small office I barely used and opened the drawer where I kept the court files, the original police report, Rachel's signed restitution agreement. All of it organized, dated, no longer heavy, just records. Paper proof of the cost of boundaries. I hadn't looked at it in months. Hadn't needed to. But something told me it was time to prepare for round 2. Sure enough, it came 3 days later. A voicemail from Rachel. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She spoke in a flat, rehearsed voice like she was checking a box. "Hey, Eli. Just calling to say I've been making my payments, and I think I've been doing well, so if there's a way we can speed things up, maybe reduce what I owe or work something out, that'd be appreciated." There was a pause. Then she added, "Also, I've been thinking about the holidays. Maybe we could talk over coffee. Let me know." I didn't call back. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, Tran, with a short note. "Do I need to respond?" She replied, "Legally, no. If she wants to negotiate, she needs to do it through counsel. Otherwise, ignore it." So I did. But I couldn't ignore what came next. 2 days later, Mara got a DM from an account she didn't recognize. No profile picture. No posts. Just a message that read, "You should know who you're really dating." Attached was a link to a PDF file, a copy of the original police report, with my name circled in red. Under it, one sentence, "He had his own sister arrested." Mara showed me the message without a word. I stared at it, felt the old reflex rise, the one that wanted to pre-explain, to apologize, to justify every decision like my dignity was something I had to defend on trial. But Mara, she just said, "People who feel consequences like betrayal often try to make accountability look cruel." Then she blocked the sender. That was it. No panic, no doubts. Just conviction. That night, I realized how much damage had been done to my instinct to be believed. I'd spent so long in a family where truth only mattered when it was convenient, where forgiveness was currency and I was always the ATM. But Mara didn't need convincing. She saw the whole picture, not just the highlight reel Rachel wanted her to see. I lay awake for a while after she fell asleep, listening to the rhythm of her breathing and the wind tapping the windows like it wanted in. I thought about how strange it is that peace doesn't come with fanfare. It shows up quietly, wears soft shoes, doesn't slam doors. You almost miss it if you're still tuned to chaos. The next morning, I took Comet and Radar on a long walk through Cherry Creek Trail. We passed cyclists, joggers, a couple arguing about what counted as a real espresso. Life unfolded around us, unaware of my past, uninterested in my battles. That's the beauty of healing. It moves you from center stage to the audience, where you can just watch the show without performing. I stopped on a footbridge and looked out over the frozen creek, snow dusting the banks like powdered sugar. I took a breath so deep, it felt like a reset button inside my chest. In that moment, I knew I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore, or reconciliation, or clarity. I had found something better than closure. I had found neutrality, no heat, no pull, just release. The following week, I received the formal update from the court. Rachel's restitution was being monitored monthly. Payments were slow but consistent. Her compliance with counseling was confirmed. It was progress, technically. But I didn't celebrate. I just noted it, filed it, and moved on. That same night, Mara handed me a wrapped box. No reason, no holiday, just a Tuesday gift. Inside was a small metal plaque, the kind you'd find on a trophy. It read, "To Eli Navarro, builder of walls worth keeping and bridges worth burning." I laughed. She grinned. "I figured you've been collecting invisible medals for years. This one should be real." I hung it in the hallway where my old family photos used to live. They were long gone now, donated or boxed. But the wall didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The only photos left were new. Me and Mara covered in paint from a volunteer site. Radar wearing a ridiculous birthday hat. Comet mid-leap, tongue out, joy captured in motion. Real life, not staged. No curated captions. Just truth. New Year's Eve came quietly, wrapped in the kind of silence I used to find unnerving. Now, it felt earned. Mara and I stood on Lookout Mountain, bundled in borrowed layers, her hands tucked inside mine while fireworks pulsed across the horizon like the city exhaling a year's worth of tension. Radar sat obediently beside us, ears twitching at every burst. Comet tried to chase the colors in the sky, tail wagging like he knew exactly what celebration was meant to feel like. I'd never been much for countdowns. They always felt forced, like squeezing sentiment into a clock. But this year, as the seconds ticked toward midnight, I felt something shift, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet settling inside my chest like dust finally deciding where to land. When the first firework faded, Mara looked at me and said, "What are you letting go of?" I thought for a second before answering. The need to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding me. She smiled like she knew that line had been growing inside me for a long time, just waiting for the right moment to step forward. January settled in like a blanket. Soft snow, shorter days, routines grounding everything in place. Life didn't get easier, but it got simpler. I woke up, walked the dogs, made coffee, kissed someone who saw me without needing a presentation. Most days, that was enough. Then, one afternoon in mid-January, I got a text from a new number. Not anonymous, not dramatic, just unfamiliar. The message was short. "Hey, this is Rachel. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but if you're open to it, I'd like to talk. No strings. Just to say things in person. If not, I understand." I stared at the screen for a long time, not out of anger, not even hesitation, just calculation. Measuring the emotional cost, the risk, the chance that maybe something new could exist between us, not a return, not a repair, but a recognition. I showed the message to Mara. She didn't tell me what to do. She just said, "If you go, don't go to fix anything, go to witness where you are." So I agreed to meet. A coffee shop in a neutral part of town, bright windows, public. No room for old habits to sneak in. When I walked in, she was already there, hair darker than I remembered, makeup minimal. A paper cup clutched in both hands like it might float away if she didn't anchor it. She stood when she saw me, nervous but grounded. I nodded, didn't hug, just sat. We didn't small talk. She got to it quickly. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not perform it. Just say it. I waited. She took a breath. You didn't deserve any of it. Not the manipulation, the theft, the lies. I thought, if I could make you feel guilty enough, I could avoid feeling it myself. That wasn't love. That was survival twisted into something selfish. She looked down, then up again. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed to know if I could say this without making excuses. I nodded. My voice didn't crack when I answered. I believe you mean it. I'm glad you're sober. I hope you stay that way. But I need you to know that my peace isn't negotiable. I worked hard for it. And it's not something I'll risk again, not even for closure. She swallowed, nodded once, slowly. I figured. I just didn't want the last thing I ever said to you to be what I screamed over the phone. We sat there for a moment in the quiet weight of that truth. Not dramatic, just real. I left first. Not because I wanted to end it, but because I knew when to walk away. I got in my truck, the same one that had once carried the weight of betrayal and now just smelled like dog treats and old receipts, and drove home without looking back. That night, Mara didn't ask how it went. She just kissed my forehead while I took off my shoes and handed me a bowl of soup she'd made without saying a word. That's what healing looked like. Not loud. Not shared in 1,000 texts. Just warmth, presence, and trust that didn't need to be proven daily. In February, I received a card in the mail. No return name, but the handwriting was old and shaky. Inside, my great-aunt Diana, the one who used to send birthday money in crisp bills with notes about staying strong, had written, "Family ties can be ribbons or chains. Make sure you know the difference. Proud of you." I taped it to the fridge, right next to Mara's magnet, shaped like a tiny taco, and a Polaroid of Comet mid-yawn. Every morning, it reminded me that blood doesn't entitle behavior. That love can be chosen, built, and protected, not just inherited. In the spring, I was promoted again field operations lead. I celebrated by taking a long weekend off and driving Mara and the dogs to a cabin near Estes Park. No signal, no calendar alerts, just pine, frozen lakes, and the kind of quiet that resets everything. On our second night there, Mara asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd let it go? If you'd forgiven her right away?" I answered honestly. I think I would have looked fine on the outside. But inside, I would have stayed trapped in the story they needed me to play. The silent fixer, the fallback plan. And I'd still be bleeding in places nobody else could see. She nodded, curled closer, and whispered, "Then I'm glad you chose a new script. I didn't know what the future held for Rachel. Whether she'd stay sober, whether she'd find someone who saw her as more than a cautionary tale. But I knew this. I didn't hate her. I just no longer carried her choices as my responsibility. And maybe that was the purest form of love I could offer, releasing both of us from the weight of who we used to be. That summer, on a random Tuesday, I took the dogs to the park. While Radar sniffed trees and Comet chased butterflies like they owed him money, a teenager zoomed past on an e-scooter, swerved too hard, almost crashed, then caught himself. He looked back, shouted, "Sorry," and sped off again. I smiled, not because it reminded me of Rachel, but because it didn't. Because not every wobble has to end in rescue. Some people correct course on their own. As I walked back toward the truck, the sun high, the dogs panting happily beside me, I counted my breaths. One for every line I'd drawn. Another for every night I'd slept without crisis. When I reached the door, I paused, took one last deep inhale and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular. Just to the life I'd built, one hard-earned choice at a time. A life where I no longer explained my boundaries, I simply lived by them. Where forgiveness wasn't owed, but optional. And where peace was no longer a fantasy, it was home. Story 2. When his sister left the dressing room wearing my gown, a wedding dress fitting ended in tears. Whispering and grinning, she spun around. "I should have been the one," my husband exclaimed. "Wow, it really suits you," as he looked in. I moved ahead with trembling hands. "Do you like it?" I asked in a kind way. She grinned. I muttered as I drew closer, "After that, you'll adore what follows." Her secret was revealed when the doors suddenly flew open a few seconds later. I'm not the kind to initiate arguments. I'm not interested in drama. I'm not a fan of turmoil. Additionally, I've always been the type of guy who, when possible, steers clear of controversy. However, there are moments when life presents you with something so ridiculous that you have no option but to fight back. This is the tale of my fiance's sister's attempt to steal my wedding gown, how my fiance assisted her in doing so, and how I came to the shocking realization that my whole relationship was a lie in one explosive moment. The doors then flew open. Let's begin from the beginning, though. After 5 years of dating, Daniel and I became engaged. Although he wasn't the most romantic, he was reliable, dependable, and I genuinely believed he loved me. I didn't question it because I had been waiting so long for him to pop the question. I just said, yes. The dress was the one item I had been most excited about, despite the stressful nature of wedding preparing. I was not the type of person who had fantasized about being married since I was a little child. However, as I eventually located the outfit, I saw why people were upset about this. It was flawless. A mermaid dress in lace, beautiful and delicate, hugging me in all the appropriate areas on my body. When I put it on, I started crying. My mom broke down in tears. My best buddy, who has never sobbed over anything, started crying. I owned it. Or it was meant to be anyhow. For whatever reason, Sister Sarah, my fiancée, decided it was hers. Sarah and I had always been rivals if I were promoted. Suddenly, she received fantastic news about her work. She would have an even more impressive trip to boast about if I shared a couple's photo of Daniel and myself on vacation. She shared a more loving photo of herself with the person she was seeing at the time. It was draining. She didn't want to be excluded, but she also didn't like me. I initially believed it to be simply insecurity, but as time went on, I began to recognize it for what it was. She was upset that I didn't include her in the wedding plans because she wanted to be me. I refused to back down when she asked Daniel about being left out. She did not serve as a bridesmaid. I wasn't even thrilled to have her as a guest. I didn't want to deal with it because I knew she would somehow make it about her. It proved to be the right choice. I didn't know how far she would go, though. Along with my mother, my maid of honor, and a few close friends, I was at the bridal boutique. The private appointment was exactly what I wanted. Then Sarah and Daniel arrived. He wasn't invited. I didn't understand why he suddenly wanted to be there when he had never shown interest in anything wedding-related before. Sarah, too. She entered as though she owned the space. Despite the tightness in my stomach, I forced a smile. Hey, didn't know you were coming. Daniel grinned back, all innocent. Sarah only wanted to see the outfit. I didn't like it, but I wasn't about to start a fight in the middle of my fitting. I expected she'd take a brief glance and depart. I was so incorrect. The helper brought out my outfit. My heart stood up simply gazing at it. But before I could even touch it, Sarah snatched it, not in an admiring awe. Let me look at it type of approach. She snatched it and headed straight into a changing room. I froze. My mom's mouth popped open. There was a strangled sound in my closest friend's throat. What on earth? I blubbed. Daniel simply gave a shrug. All she wants to do is check it out. Like it was no big deal, he remarked. I yelled, "She's not the bride." My ears were able to detect my pulse. I'm wearing that dress. The curtains opened, revealing Sarah in my bridal gown before I could storm in and tear it from her. She spun around, rubbing her hands across the cloth and grinning as if she had won something. She then turned to face Daniel. He muttered, "Whoa, you look great in that." I swore for a moment. The world fell quiet. I was immobile, unable to breathe. Sarah was observing me. A sneer curved her lips. I was filled with victory. Then she said something. Her voice was kind, yet it was so full of poison that it made my skin crawl. I should have been the one. My entire body went frigid. Sarah believed she had triumphed. She believed that I had given her something. My smile was slow, sweet, and lethal. I moved forward a step. "Do you like it?" I inquired. Sarah grinned more broadly. "Yes, I do." I smelled her scent as I leaned in close. After that, you will adore what follows. The doors of the store suddenly sprang open. I had never seen a lady before, but she barged in. Elegant, tall, and carrying a baby. She did not give me a look. Daniel was in her direct line of sight. "You must be joking with me." She lost her temper. Daniel's entire body tensed up. Sarah froze. With her eyes flaming, the lady rushed up to Daniel. "As you ignore my calls regarding your kid, you stand here playing dress up with her. The room blew up. My mother let out a gasp. My companion gazed. It was as though the shop assistant wanted to vanish. The floor underneath me shifted. "What?" I spoke in a strangely serene tone. At last, the woman turned to face me. "You were unaware, were you?" With a sour laugh, she said, "Obviously not. For weeks now, he has been avoiding me." She repositioned the infant in her embrace. "Is this the child of your fiancé? Her age is 2 months." I swear my breathing stopped. My ears began to ring. My fiancé Daniel gave birth to a kid, an entire infant. Sarah was also aware. She had been smirking for that reason. She had been behaving so smug because of this, because she believed she had won in some way. It seemed as if lightning had hit the room. Nobody said anything. Nobody made a move. The color had gone out of Daniel's face. Sarah appeared to have been slapped, yet moments before she had been brimming with self-satisfied assurance. The woman's eyes were flaming as she gazed down at him while still holding his child. "You believed you might simply vanish?" She gave a hiss. "You don't pick up when I call. You're assisting your sister play bride in someone else's wedding gown after ignoring the court summons." I had the impression that I was hovering above my own body. I looked across at Daniel. I sounded weirdly composed. "Do you have a kid?" Eyes flashing to Sarah as though she might save him, he swallowed. Sarah, still wearing my dress, tensed, then spoke in a frantic yet guarded tone. Since I would later find out it was her name, she shouted out, "She's lying, Natalie." Give a sour chuckle. She moved the infant around in her arms. The little creature softly curled. "Correct." With her phone out, Natalie remarked, "Let us examine the falsehoods I have been sending you texts about for several months." After giving her screen a couple taps, she flipped it around. Message after message. "Natalie, I need to talk to you, Daniel." "Natalie, before the court mandates child support, we must establish it." "Natalie, she is ill, and I am unable to contact you. You have to be a dad. If you don't, Natalie, I promise you that I will at least let your fiancé know before she marries you." I felt sick to my stomach. Sarah tried to knock the phone out of her hands by lunging at it. "Nothing is proven by that." She lost her temper. "Messages can be faked by anyone. Are you serious now?" Natalie took a step back and hissed. I noticed something at that point, as you know. Sarah turned toward Daniel as she stood just in front of his body. The fact that he wasn't arguing or protesting. A terrible idea slithered into my head. "You've known for how long?" I hardly raised my voice above a whisper as I asked Sarah. Sarah remained silent. I learned everything from that. Not only had she kept it from me, but she had known all along. He had been urged to conceal it by her. My own fiancé, the man I was meant to wed, the man who allowed his sister to dress up as the bride and try on my dress. I had never experienced the kind of anger that welled up inside of me. However, Natalie's voice broke the tension once more before I could say anything. "Do you honestly believe that I came here merely to warn her?" She tilted her head in question. A smile curved her lips. "To make sure she saw this, I came here." She produced a second sheet of paper, this one from the court. Natalie threw the paper on a nearby table before I could even comprehend what was happening. I took a step forward and picked it up with trembling hands. A paternity order was issued. According to a court document, Daniel was ordered to begin paying child support after it was established that he was the biological father of Natalie's child, that his assets might be seized, and his wages would be garnished if he didn't comply. I felt as though I was looking at a stranger when I looked up at him. I said in a whisper, "You knew. You knew. And you let me plan a wedding with you anyway." Daniel finally spoke. "I was going to tell you when I snapped before or after we walked down the aisle." Sarah, who still hadn't taken off my dress, crossed her arms. "Oh, stop being dramatic," she scoffed. "People make mistakes." I stared at her in disbelief. She sounded angry. Not at Daniel, not at the fact that he had cheated and had a child with another woman. She was angry at me like I was the problem. Natalie let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "You know what? I don't even care about your wedding drama." She turned back to Daniel, her expression ice cold. "I came here for one reason, to let you know that since you ignored the first order," she leaned in. "The judge recently authorized my plea for full custody." Daniel flinched. Sarah gasped, and then she lost it. "What the?" she yelled, moving near Natalie. "You can't do that. He has rights. You're not taking his child away from him." Natalie lifted an eyebrow. "Oh, now you care. Sarah's hands were trembling. Her whole body was trembling. I watched as something snapped in her expression. She looked to Daniel, eyes wide and frantic. "You're not going to let her steal your baby, right?" she whispered. Then everything made sense. Sarah wasn't only trying to outdo others. She wasn't only attempting to draw attention to herself. She was more than a controlling sister with an odd fixation. She had a crush on her own brother. Daniel took a while to respond to her. His expression was inscrutable, as if he was suddenly discovering something. However, Sarah lost her temper. She faced me once again. A look of rage contorted her face. She spat, "This is all your fault. None of this would be taking place if you weren't present." It nearly made me chuckle. "Are you saying that I am to blame for your brother's infidelity?" I was not heard by her. She was going downhill. "Everything was damaged by you. He abruptly lost interest in what truly mattered when you entered our family. I lost him because of you." There was no sound in the shop. My mom was paralyzed. My buddies appeared to be viewing a real-life horror film. Daniel as well. Daniel moved away from Sarah slowly. At last, something seemed to register. I glanced between them both. My gut is roiling. "He was never taken from you by me." Slowly, I said, "You can't take him." Sarah's hands tightened into fists at her sides and her breath caught. And then, with a voice so poisonous I might murder, she muttered, "He ought to have been." I gazed at her. Daniel gazed at her. Natalie even gazed at her. Sarah then grabbed the front of the bridal dress and tore it right down the middle before anybody could react. It was louder than it should have been. The sound of ripping cloth. My gown. My garment was torn along the center, splitting lightly as if it had never been important. Sarah simply stood there, going up and down. Hands were still gripping the torn cloth. Her face was crazy. Nobody said anything. Nobody made a move. Next, simultaneously, "Are you crazy?" My mother yelled, her voice trembling with anger. My maid of honor let out a gasp. My pals feverishly murmured. I was so focused on Sarah that I hardly heard the boutique assistant, who appeared to be about to faint. The damaged clothing made her hands shake. Her expression was contorted, but not only because of rage. Something is broken. Daniel had gone white. He moved slowly away from her once more. He looked at the torn cloth as if it had just struck him. How far things had progressed. Sarah then turned to face me. "I was meant to have this," she muttered. I got goosebumps from something in her voice. She continued, "Not just the dress, not only the nuptials. Everything." I gazed. "What are you discussing?" Her mouth quivered. She twisted her face. Then, as if something had broken inside of her, she spun around Daniel. "You were the first to love me." I felt sick to my stomach. There was complete silence in the room. Sarah's gaze darted between Daniel and me, and her breathing was labored. I was there all the time. Her voice wavered as she went on. "It was me who recognized you. I was the one who understood everything about you, stood by you, and encouraged you." Then she appeared, and all of a sudden, I was irrelevant. Daniel had a blank expression on his face. Very, very quietly after that, "Sarah," she winced. "Your brother is me." A sharp breath. Sarah shook her head angrily, as if she could wipe away the tears that filled her eyes. She muttered, "It doesn't have to be like that. That wasn't always the case. Before she wrecked everything, we were really close." She looked back at me. Pure flaming anger filled the eyes. "I despise you." I should have been terrified, she believed. I ought to have been upset. But my only emotion was sympathy. For this was more than jealousy. This was more than simply a contest. Sarah had honestly persuaded herself that her own brother should love her in the same manner as a husband does. She had had hallucinations. Daniel, who for years had disregarded, supported, or condoned her actions, was only now beginning to see the implications of that. The quiet was broken by Natalie's voice. She shook her head at Sarah and mumbled, "I knew something was weird about you, but fuck. I feared Sarah may punch her since she turned on her so quickly." "You?" She spat. "Everything has been wrecked because of you. You and your child, who is a bastard. I will always treasure the move she made, which prevented her from finishing." Natalie used one hand. Note that she grabbed the entire glass of champagne from the boutique's refreshment table and tossed it directly in Sarah's face, while she was still carrying her infant. The liquid soaked her makeup, causing hair to adhere to her face, and Sarah let out a screeching yell. She stumbled back, thrashing hands. Natalie grinned. "I'm sorry." Sarah let out a scream. A full-fledged scream of tantrum. Daniel finally lost his temper at that point. Sarah stopped. I had never heard his voice that loudly. It sounded disgusted more than anything else. Not at Natalie, not at me. At her. "Are you even able to hear yourself?" As he approached Sarah, he made a demand. "Her outfit was damaged by you. A baby is being insulted by you. You're behaving like a crazy person." He halted himself, combed his hair with a hand. "Sarah, Jesus. Do you require assistance?" Sarah flinched. "No," she said, her eyes flitting. "No, it is not what you mean." Daniel remained silent, and that quiet. The last crack was that one. Sarah clutched her fists at her sides. After choking back a sob, she pushed past everyone and fled the store. She was never seen by me again. After Sarah had left, all of a sudden, everything fell apart. Daniel made an effort to apologize, pleaded with me to pay attention. However, I was finished. I removed my ring of engagement. I handed it to him. After that, I left. I wish I could claim that Sarah and Daniel vanished out of my life like magic. However, that isn't how life operates. Sarah shifted. I have no idea where, and I don't give a damn. Daniel made many attempts to get in touch, including calls, SMS, and even an appearance at my mom's house. Mutual friends informed me that he was having difficulties, but I never responded, that he began therapy at last. Said he was attempting to understand how he had let his sister to control him for so much time. Well done. Conversely, Natalie became a friend. We stayed in contact. She received all of Daniel's unpaid child support. She went on, encountered a person who genuinely cared for her and her daughter, as well as myself. I recovered, I took a trip, I concentrated on myself. I'll get married someday, but never to someone who would allow his sister to trample me. Not to Daniel. Certainly not while wearing a dress from the same store. It was a cursed location. In hindsight, I ought to have recognized the warning indicators. However, love may blind you at times. No more. What I took up from all of this is that you should believe individuals when they first present themselves. Story 3. Just before the ceremony, a cheap, oversized gown was used in lieu of my wedding dress. My prospective sister-in-law laughed. "You look better in this." My fiancé chuckled. "Whatever my family desires, you'll wear it." I approached the altar with a smile, grabbed the microphone, and made a startling statement that shocked everyone in the room. "Hello, go ahead and read it." I'm at a loss on where to post this. I'm still attempting to comprehend what transpired. This will be lengthy. And to be honest, I'm writing it because I'm at a loss on what to do. I'm a lady of 28 who grew up in Illinois. Last Saturday, I was meant to get married in Chicago. We reserved a space close to the lake, one of those historic structures with enormous windows and antique flooring. As soon as we took a tour of it, I fell in love. I spent nearly 3 years with my now ex-fiancé Mark. At a family cookout in April of last year, he proposed. After some time spent discussing marriage, I believed we were on the same page. His family has never been quite right, extremely opinionated and appearance-focused. However, I assumed that was their nature. I believed they would change their mind if I was courteous, kind, and respectful. I did my best to blend in. I put money down for my own wedding gown. I didn't want anyone to assist me with the cost. The gown had tiny pearl buttons all the way down, a low back, and a fitted sun and lace design. The length of the train was ideal, just enough to make you feel unique, but not overly theatrical. When I first wore it in the boutique, I started crying. I felt lovely in that dress. I had delivered it to the location 3 days prior to the wedding. The location was accustomed to hosting weddings and featured a locked wardrobe and a secured bridal suite. They promised to keep everything secure. I asked the planner to confirm it 3 times. The morning of the wedding arrives. I'm nervous, obviously, but mostly excited. I arrive early to get ready with my bridesmaids. We take selfies, laugh, have a few mimosas, get our makeup done, and do the typical things. After that, it is time to put on the dress. I go to the closet where the dress should be hanging. It's not there. Instead, there's this thing, I don't even know how to describe it. The fabric looked cheap, like something you'd find at a Halloween store. It was a basic white gown. Huge, baggy, unflattering plastic buttons. The tag was still attached. Some off-brand company. It was 4 sizes too big for me. At first I thought there had been a mistake. I called the planner who swore it had been locked up the whole time. My maid of honor, Jess, was already trying to reach the boutique. People were running around. I just stood there, frozen. Then Mark's sister Rachel walked in. Rachel has never liked me. She's very proper, very old school. And she made it clear early on that she didn't think I was wife material for her brother. I work in digital marketing. I don't come from a rich family. I'm not flashy. I guess I didn't check enough boxes. She walked in, took one look at the cheap dress hanging up and smiled. Not a confused or sympathetic smile. It was smug. She said, "That suits you better anyway," just like that. I asked her what she meant. She just raised her eyebrows and said, "Our family has a certain standard. You'll understand once you're married." And I'm standing there still in my robe, and I could feel my face heating up. I told her that someone needed to get my actual dress, and she just walked out like she didn't have time for my attitude. At this point, I was shaking. I had this horrible pit in my stomach, and all I could think was, Mark will fix this. He'll step in. He wouldn't let this happen. I had someone go get him. He came in about 5 minutes later, already dressed in his tux, looking calm and relaxed. I told him what happened. I pointed to the dress and said someone swapped mine. "Where is my actual dress?" He looked at it and laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "It's just a dress. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I said, "Mark, this isn't the dress I bought. This isn't even close." He said, "And I swear I'll never forget this. Whatever my family desires, you'll wear it. You're marrying into us, not the other way around." That was when it all clicked. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. They did it on purpose. Mark, his sister, maybe even his mom. Someone in that family had taken my dress and replaced it to humiliate me or put me in my place. This was their power play, and Mark was in on it. I stared at him. I didn't utter a thing. I just walked past him and went back inside the suite. My bridesmaids were still there, along with a few other family members. I requested merely to assist me into the inexpensive outfit. She looked frightened, but did it. I suppose she knew what I was going to do. I strolled down the hall past the planners and the flowers and the people who were starting to gather. People grinned at me, believing that was part of the plan. They had no idea. The music started. The officiant was already standing in the front. Mark was there beaming. Rachel was grinning in the front row. I proceeded carefully down the aisle, but instead of taking my position at the altar, I paused, turned to the throng, and grabbed for the microphone. The DJ had for announcements. People started whispering. I could see phones going up recording. I said, "Thank you everyone for coming here today. I am aware that you arrived anticipating a wedding. Most likely you were thrilled to see the flowers, the vows, and the dress. This isn't a party though. Not for me anyhow. My gown. Just prior to the ceremony, this one was used in lieu of the original. Not by chance. Intentionally. By a member of the groom's relatives." And Mark chuckled when I questioned him about it. "I would wear anything his family requested," he assured me. "I'm going to tell you all something now. I will not wed this man. I refuse to be a part of a family that tolerates this sort of manipulation. Despite my lack of wealth and connections, I maintain my dignity." I returned the microphone and left. I believe the difficult part was finished when I left the wedding that day. I was mistaken. The bridal suite was the last place I visited. I didn't get dressed or get my suitcase. Still wearing that terrible, scratchy outfit, I simply walked out of the building. My pocketbook was thrust into my arms as my maid of honor rushed behind me. Silently, we got into her car and drove off. It wasn't until we arrived at her residence that we spoke. I sat on the couch and gazed at the floor as she poured me a drink of water. I felt numb. The truth still hadn't set in. My phone then began to buzz. Text messages, makes calls, voicemails. In minutes, dozens. From my relatives, from his relatives, from Mark. My mother was unaware of the situation. She and a few members of his family had been waiting for me to wake up while seated on the groom's side. She sent me an all-caps SMS. "What's happening?" I needed to be by myself, I told Jess. After hugging me, she left me in her guest room. Wearing that poor robe, I lay down and sobbed till I passed out. I had more than 70 missed calls when I got up. Mark had made 23 calls. I had received 2 calls from his mother. I stored the savage voicemail that Rachel had left me. What she said: "Our entire family was humiliated by you. Your reputation has just been ruined. I hope it was worthwhile." But the most shocking thing, they had located my real wedding gown. I received a photo via text from someone on the venue personnel. Near the rear of the arena, my outfit was concealed behind a closed janitor closet after being placed into a rubbish bag. Someone had made the extra effort to hide it in a place no one would notice. I cried once more. It wasn't a joke. This wasn't a last-minute change of clothes. This was prearranged. I inquired about security video from the personnel. They informed me that they would need to verify with management since only specific locations were covered. I waited. They gave me a call back 2 days later. They had video. Around 5 a.m. on the wedding day, a person wearing a hoodie entered the bridal room before any staff members showed up, and 10 minutes later, they departed with what seemed to be a white dress bag. When I filed a report, they gave the police the film, but the investigator advised me not to get too excited because it was a family gathering. They claimed it might have been anyone. Mark arrived at my residence a few days later. I refused to allow him in. We had a conversation in the corridor. I didn't care that he appeared exhausted, as if he hadn't slept since the wedding. "Did you know your family replaced my dress?" I questioned him bluntly. He took a while to respond. He simply let out a sigh. He went on to say that they were concerned the initial garment was too skimpy. According to my mother, it did not adequately honor the custom. I was in full shock when I looked at him. He continued to speak. "I suppose they made up their minds after she spoke with Rachel. Wearing something more modest might be preferable." You know what I said? "I just went along with it when I saw it, even though he claimed that I didn't think they would actually do it. I assumed you would comprehend. You get it? My garment was taken by them, changed it out, embarrassed me in front of my visitors, and he assumed I would comprehend. I told him to go because I didn't want to see him ever again. I recently uploaded a little video of my lecture on TikTok. It became viral within hours, even though I didn't want her to. Commenters were acting like wild queens. Girl, run. Hurry. A whole generational curse was avoided by her." A couple wedding blogs picked it up. Then it was covered by a local Chicago news outlet. Mark's sister did not remain anonymous at first, but I did. She began posting irate stories on Instagram, accusing me of being mentally unstable, ruining her brother's life, and emphasizing the importance of family. She was unaware that internet users are more adept at digging than the FBI. Her workplace, her wedding registry, and even old videos of her boasting that family customs are more important than emotions were discovered within a week. Now, I was getting screenshot messages from strangers. She had previously acted in this manner, according to some. I received a message from a girl who said that Rachel had changed her maid of honor dress at her wedding at the last minute because she didn't like the cut. This was nothing new. Her pattern was this: 1 week following the walkout, an anonymous email was sent to me. No subject line, 2 attachments, and a brief message. "You should know who really planned it," the message said. A screenshot of a group chat was one of the attachments. It displayed messages exchanged between their mother, Mark, and Rachel. Weeks before the wedding, they were talking about my dress. "Rachel, it's excessive. We can locate another item for her. Mark, she'll act out. Mom, she will move past it. We'll swap it early and keep her occupied with the makeup crew." I read it 5 times. I was having trouble breathing. He helped, Mark knew. He didn't only comply with it, he benefited the planet. I'm at that point at the moment. I'm speaking with an attorney to see if there is anything I can do legally. I'm collaborating with the police and the venue. I'm sitting on security footage, videos, and screenshots. I haven't yet made all of this public. Not all of it, but I'm tempted since they chose the wrong person to disgrace me if that's their goal. How this finishes is still unknown to me. I have no idea what I'll be doing tomorrow. However, I am aware of one thing: I'm not going to remain silent. No more. After reading that email, I just sat on the floor. I was in my flat alone with the illumination of my laptop screen lighting up the dark room. I reviewed the group chat snapshot over and again till my eyes ached. Mark didn't just let it happen. He helped plan it. He kissed me goodnight every single night, discussed our future, inquired about plans for the honeymoon. The entire time, he was lying. The treachery wasn't what struck me the most, though. It was that I had questioned my own abilities, that I nearly persuaded myself that perhaps I was exaggerating, that it may have been a strange accident. Perhaps that wasn't intentional. No, from the start it was a setup, and I had no idea what the whole thing was. I received another message 2 evenings after receiving the anonymous email. This time it came from Alyssa, Mark's cousin. I had only ever spoken to her at family gatherings, informal activities. She always struck me as courteous but aloof. Her message began with the following: "I have to tell you something, even though I know you probably don't want to hear from any of our family members." She continued by saying that modesty was not the only reason for clothing sabotage. Tradition wasn't the only factor. It has to do with control. I guess I didn't bring anything to the table, according to Mark's relatives. The fact that I wasn't for money annoyed them. The fact that I had opinions annoyed them. They believed me to be challenging, too assertive, too independent. Before the marriage began, they believed they could break me a little and humiliate me in order to make me simpler to manage. Alyssa claimed to have heard Rachel and her mother discussing taming me and how such ladies must be tamed before they can be considered a true bride. What the devil? I said, she said. She didn't say anything earlier because she didn't believe they would follow through. She also mentioned that it was the first time she had ever seen Rachel stop talking as I left the wedding. Actually, if I ever required Alyssa's assistance, she volunteered to testify with justice. I began to go over everything: emails, texts, and even some shared planning documents that I was able to view in a shared wedding document from several months prior. On Rachel's dress-fitting entry, I discovered a secret comment. Verify the final fitting location. We could require a contingency plan. It was something I had never seen. It was there, but it had been concealed. This was something she had been planning for months. I also recalled Rachel asking me strangely detailed questions about how I intended to store my dresses during the week of the rehearsal dinner. And there I was, directly before me. There was never any miscommunication here. It was a trap. My tale was leaked to a local gossip page in Chicago. I was angry at first. However, I later recognized it as Rachel. The tone of the message was intended to make me appear insane. I created a scene because I didn't like the wedding ambiance, like I was some drama queen. It said that I staged the sabotage to get attention and that I had a tantrum over nothing. However, she made a mistake. She used a username I had never used in a phony Reddit screenshot. It was pointed up in one of the top comments. After that, someone else shared a side-by-side comparison of the gossip page's information and the actual TikTok video. They also didn't go together. The tide quickly changed. Rachel was attacked by the comment section. People began DMing me, tagging me, and asking whether I wanted to share the truth. A wedding planner from a different state messaged me after I remained silent and watched. Rachel was someone she knew. She had previously collaborated with her on a wedding where the bride's makeup artist was abruptly switched due to disapproval from the family. There was a trail, a pattern. I discovered something I had overlooked just when I believed I had everything. While searching through old emails, she came across one that was forwarded by the venue planner around 1 week before to the wedding. Mark's mother gave it to him. It inquired as to whether last-minute adjustments to the wedding suite arrangement would be feasible. The email requested access to the location prior to the staff's arrival, but it made no mention of the attire. The hooded person entered that way. In this manner, the garment was taken off and concealed. Deliberately, the door had been left unlocked. Hours before the event began, they let someone entry. At 8 in the morning, the arena was scheduled to open. At 5:12 a.m., the security footage was timestamped. The venue attested to the fact that early entry was provided, meaning that whoever entered had access for over 3 hours before anyone noticed anything. Following everything I discovered, including the group chat, anonymous emails, texts, venue access, and video, I became aware that I was sitting on a treasure trove. This was no longer simply about a clothing. This concerned those who believed they could control and degrade others while getting away with it. And they did for a time. Not this time, though. I hired a lawyer first. I gave it all to him. Screenshots and my speech's video. The dress thief's videotape. Mark's mother's email requesting early entry to the venue. He was taken aback. Said that it was among the most bizarre incidents of pre-wedding sabotage he had ever witnessed. He said that I have a case for damages and fraud in addition to emotional suffering. For the outfit, the location, And the merchants, I had receipts. Their small lesson resulted in the squandering of thousands of dollars. After that, I began talking with the TikTok accounts and wedding bloggers that had contacted me. I gave them the truth. I was straightforward yet honest. I haven't yet mentioned names. People paid attention to what I had to say initially. The post became widely shared, thousands of comments, millions of views. The majority of them were encouraging. A few were upset. Some made an effort to protect Mark and his family. However, those were soon drowned out. A reporter contacted me from a local Chicago newspaper. A podcast follows. A TV morning show follows. I waited. Allowed the storm to intensify. I posted something, a straightforward one. Their names, their behavior, their communications, their faces. I shared screenshots of the group discussion on the internet. I played the voicemail left by Rachel. I included the messages from Mark. I've included the venue's confirmation and his mother's email. I exposed them to their true selves. The tale went viral in a matter of hours. All of Rachel's social media accounts were removed. Mark's mother also did. Mark attempted to submit a reply. A week or so. This is not what I intended to happen. I'm sorry. It didn't work out. His work was swamped with people, social media profiles. Customers withdrew. He was employed by a public relations company that boasted about its ethical storytelling. Nobody failed to notice the irony. Within 3 days, he was sacked by the company. A private school was where Rachel worked. Parents began reaching out to the board. They requested her to step down. Publicly, their entire family name was degraded, quite loudly. This is where I acknowledge my own error. I disregarded the warning signs. I witnessed Mark's family's dominance. However, I dismissed it. I believed I could maintain harmony. I believed they would accept me if I simply demonstrated my worth. I was mistaken. I wasted time. I lost money. I lost the person I had been for years, a person who had shrunk to meet the demands of others. Yes, I did make a mistake, but I have now corrected it. They now have to deal with the fallout from theirs. Do you recall that early entrance to the venue? To get entry, it turns out that Mark's mother falsified a vendor signature. It's a crime. The press charges at the venue. Not that I had to. Due to her trespassing and interference with private property, Mark's mother is currently being sued. Both Mark and Rachel are identified as participants involved. Their lawyer made a secret settlement attempt the last I heard. I said no, because I'm not the only one involved. It concerns everyone who has ever been bullied, coerced, or degraded because someone else believed they were inferior. I left with something greater. Even if I didn't have the wedding I had envisioned, I took everything they attempted to take from me and used it to bury the delusion they created, and I left with my dignity intact. Mark contacted me again and pleaded with me not to ruin his life. Since I wasn't the one who damaged it, I didn't respond. That was his own doing. You don't always receive the happy ending. There are moments when you receive truth, anger, and fire. And for me, that's still a joyful conclusion.